Hi, I'm Matt Sussman, and I want to take you through a demo of Azure Advanced Threat Protection. And I want to show you how we could do some identity threat hunting with this product. Let's jump into it and take a look. All right, so most organizations will use many different security products to protect their organization. And so the security alerts produced by those products, they're aggregated typically through a security information and event management tool, or also known as a SIEM. And that's typically for a SecOps analyst or somebody in a security operations center or even an IT admin to then go out and later investigate. Well, often, and I'm sure a lot of you can attest to this, that the sheer volume of those alerts, they may be actual alerts and may be false positives, but those analysts and those individuals, they can get alert fatigue. And a single analyst can manually investigate maybe 10 alerts per day while their SIEM receives hundreds or even thousands of alerts during that same period of time. And because of this, that analyst must prioritize and focus on the most severe alerts. And Azure Advanced Threat Protection helps those teams focus on the most important alerts by reducing the amount of noise and providing a rich investigation experience. So here we are inside the Azure Advanced Threat Protection portal, and let's assume that our analyst is going to start investigating only the high severity alerts. So over here on the left side, we're going to click on High under Open. And that way we can filter on just the high alerts. And then we're going to scroll down to start with the oldest of alerts. Now here we can see that our first alert here was suspected identity theft using Pass the Ticket. And we can see that's for Ron Harper's account. Now, if you're not familiar with Pass the Ticket, it's a lateral movement technique in which attackers steal a Kerberos ticket from one computer and use it to gain access to another computer by reusing the stolen ticket. And in this detection, a Kerberos ticket is found in use on 2 or more different computers. So I'm going to click on Suspected Identity Theft, Pass a Ticket for Ron Harper, and click on that alert. Now that analyst, they're going to see Ron Harper's Kerberos ticket was taken from this finance server and used on this RDP server to access 2 different resources. Well, let's see what those 2 resources are. And the first phase of this investigation is to triage and determine if this alert's a false positive. And I'm going to just point out here that the progression of Ron Harper's Kerberos ticket as it migrates across his finance server to RDP to the 2 resources, and I can see the evidence here that's happened. So I can see date and timestamp, I can see what the resources are, I could also see the IP addresses, a lot of great information here. So let's kick off our investigation by clicking on Ron Harper's account to get to his account page. And we can see here that he's a help desk engineer in the IT group, and he's currently logged on to the SharePoint server and the finance server. So I'm going to scroll down here and just dig a little deeper, and we can see that there's some lateral movement paths. And so on the left side, I'm going to click on lateral movement paths. And then to see my different paths, I'm going to filter by date, and we're going to first choose November 21st, 2018. And this is where I can see that there was a lateral path through the SharePoint server and out to Nick Cowley's account. Now let's go ahead and click on another date here, and let's click on April 26th. And this is where I can see another lateral movement path and how they may have accessed Nick Cowley's account from the Ron Harper account through the help desk security group and off to the SharePoint server. All right, so that's interesting. So let's go and take a look at Nick's account and see what he has to do with this. Now, we could see here Nick is a CISO, and he's got the sensitive badge, meaning that he is a part of 2 sensitive security groups. So let's see what those groups are. Well, he's a member of administrators and domain admins. And so I'm then going to click on the name of his machine to then get some more details about his machine. So I'm going to click on this Nick C Lab and to get some details about that. And then I'm also going to click on the SharePoint server to see if anything stands out from that as well. Now, on the left side, well, actually, one thing I want to point out is there are some alerts for that machine. We'll come back to that in a moment, but it's not related to his account because it's actually related to the machine. But over here on the left side of the screen, I can see that there's 5 alerts related to Nick's account. So let's go ahead and click on those 5 alerts. And we can see that there's some alerts going on here. And we're going to scroll down. And just look at the different titles of these alerts, we can see that his account is showing some suspicious activity, right? This is not normal for somebody's user account. Now, what I'm afraid of, though, is that the domain admin security group may be compromised since Nick's account is a member, which that could be worrisome for obvious reasons, right? So let's go ahead and click on this alert, suspected identity theft using pass the ticket. Now, pass the ticket, again, it's a lateral movement in which attackers steal a Kerberos ticket from one computer and they use it to gain access to another computer by reusing that stolen ticket. So in this type of detection, we can see that this Kerberos ticket's used on 2 or more computers. So I'm going to go ahead and go back a screen here to Nick's list of alerts for his account, and we're going to click on this remote code execution attempt, which is interesting. And obviously this is a rare occurrence in an enterprise environment, but let's click on these 2 methods to see what those methods were and how those attempts were made. And so we could see that his account was used to remotely run an unknown WMI to then create a service. And bad actors will typically use this to compromise administrative credentials and then use a zero-day exploit to then execute remote commands on a domain controller, then gain domain dominance. And so I'm going to review all of this under the evidence, and I'm going to click on unknown WMI met and see if there's any additional information. And so I can see that there's a few things interesting happening. And so then I'm going to go down and click on this PS exec service, and we can see what's happening here. And then, just to give some background on this, remote code execution exploits, they can then be used to gain persistency and collect information or even denial of service attacks or really any other reason. But Azure ATP detects PS exec, remote WMI, and PowerShell connections. And this raises the confidence level of me as the analyst to determine whether or not it's a false positive or a true positive. So let's go back to his main account screen. And we have another alert here for suspected skeleton key attack using encryption downgrade. So let's click on that and let's take a look here. Now, skeleton key, this is a type of malware that runs on domain controllers, and it allows authentication to the domain without any account, without knowing its password. That's really interesting. And so this malware is often using a weaker encryption algorithm to hash the user's password on the domain controller, and an attacker can then use this type of malware to gain persistence in the domain. And so just keep an eye on this, right? This is really interesting. So let's go back to his user account. And in the timeline here, we're going to click on suspicious modification of sensitive groups. Now, attackers often add users to a highly privileged group to gain access to more resources and gain more persistency. And I want to point out here the details on this and the evidence that we could see down here at the bottom. Now, I can see that from the evidence section that Nick has not modified this group in quite a while. And this is, again, adding to my suspicion. So let's go back. Let's take another look at some other things here. Let's take a look at suspected DC sync attack and the replication of directory services. So Active Directory replication, as you know, this is a process by which changes that are made on one domain controller are then synchronized with all other domain controllers. And given necessary permissions, an attacker can initiate a replication request, allowing them to retrieve the data stored in Active Directory, including password hashes. So as the analyst, I now learn that Nick's account was used to replicate the directory services data from the Jeff-L desktop machine. So we're going to click on Jeff-L desktop to investigate this a little bit more. Now I can see that the OS ID underneath the machine name here denotes that this device is a Windows 10 Pro machine. So therefore, a legitimate replication request should not have been initiated from this device. Now investigating this on the details page, I can then see that there's 3 attempts to replicate the directory services. So let's go ahead and click on these 3 alerts to dig a little bit more into this. Now initially, I think that this suspected attacker tried to use a DC shadow attack and a few different flavors here. And on the timeline view, I'm going to click on suspected DC shadow attack domain controller promotion, and let's start there. So domain controller shadow or DC shadow attack is an attack designed to change directory objects using malicious replication. And this attack can be performed from any machine by creating a rogue domain controller using a replication process. So in a DC shadow attack, RPC and LDAP are used to register the machine account as a domain controller using domain admin rights, and then perform replication using the granted replication rights over DRSU API and send changes to directory objects. So in this type of detection here in Azure Advanced Threat Protection, a security alert is triggered when a machine in the network tries to register as a rogue domain controller. So let's go back a screen. And let's click on this second one, suspected DC shadow attack, DC replication request. And let's take a look at that one. So Active Directory replication is the process by which changes are made on one domain controller and synchronized to other domain controllers. Now, given those permissions, again, attackers can grant rights for their machine account, allowing them to impersonate a domain controller. So attacks strive to initiate a malicious replication request, allowing them to change Active Directory objects on a genuine domain controller, which can give the attackers persistence in that domain. So in this type of detection in Azure ATP, an alert is triggered when a suspicious replication request is generated against a genuine domain controller protected by Azure ATP. The behavior is indicative of techniques used in domain controller shadow attacks. So let's go back a screen here. And after taking in all this information, as the analyst, I might conclude that this is an actual true positive. It's real, and that Nick's account here has actually been compromised. So the second part of my investigation needs to be focused on the scope of breach. So I'm going to start by checking the logged on users. So we're going to click on that button. And I can see the logged on users are Jeff Leatherman and Nick Crowley. Now, Nick's account has previously been identified as compromised. And so I'm going to click on Jeff's account here to bring up those account details. Now we can see that Jeff is a financial accounting manager and a member of the finance team. So let's click on logged on computers and see what's going on here. And I can see that his account is logged on to 4 different machines, including an RDP server and a finance server. Now, I want to check to see if there's more of this. So we're going to scroll down on the timeline view, and you can see the sequence starts to appear to repeat. So I'm going to move on to digging deeper into these lateral movement paths. So on the left side here, just like we did before, we're going to click on lateral movement paths, and we're going to change our date to April 26, 2018. Now, when I click on this date, it's going to bring up this dialog box here, and I can see that path, just like we saw before, showing an attacker might laterally use to escalate their organizational privileges. So from Jeff's account through the finance and accounting security group, to the finance server, to Ron's account, to the help desk security group, to the SharePoint server, and then over to Nick. Now, the Finance and Accounting Security Group is also a local admin on Finance Server 3. And this elevated security makes it possible for that attacker to then slow down Finance Server 3. And the slowdown manipulates a legitimate user call to Ron at the help desk for troubleshooting help. Now, this was the attacker's goal, perhaps, and waited for a privileged user to then compromise those credentials. So once Ron accesses that finance server, the attacker will then log into Jeff's account and steal those credentials from the server's memory, and those stolen credentials can then be used to move laterally throughout the organization. Now, Ron's account is a member of Help Desk, who is also a local administrator on the SharePoint server. And that path of the lateral attack began with Jeff's account, which provided elevated permissions on Finance Server 3. And with those permissions, the attacker acquired Ron's login credentials. And that gave him access to the SharePoint server and then ultimately Nick's account. Now here's the flow of the attacker, right? From Jeff to the Finance server to the SharePoint server to Nick. So I think that Jeff is actually the culprit here. So let's go over and look at these 3 alerts for Jeff's account. And let's scroll down a little bit. And we can see the first alert is a suspicious VPN connection. So let's click on that. And now this tells me that Jeff's account usually connects from London, but we identified a login from an unfamiliar computer in Manila, Philippines. And this establishes the initial breach of information here within the organization. And there's where you could see I typically connect from London, but in this case, he was connecting from Manila, Philippines. Okay, so let's go back a screen. Now we could also see that it was used to perform a user and group membership reconnaissance using SAMR. And so user and group membership reconnaissance probes are used by attackers to map the organization's directory structure and target to identify privileged accounts for subsequent later steps in the attack. So the Security Account Manager Remote or SAMR protocol is one of the methods used to query the directory to perform this type of mapping. So I may want to validate those queries. So we're going to click on the 2 security principles. And during the initial learning period that the machine learning algorithm uses inside Azure ATP, it profiles which computer's SAMR queries are made from. And in the first month of Azure ATP being deployed, no alerts were triggered, which that's a good sign. But now this alert evaluates individual and enumerated queries by elevated sensitive accounts like Lidia here in groups such as domain admins. And the analyst, me, I can then continue researching those other alerts. But let's go back. And here we can see the attacker used a technique called Kerberos golden ticket, which triggered a suspected golden ticket usage time anomaly. So let's go ahead and click on that. And let's continue our investigation. Now, attackers with access to domain admin rights can compromise the Kerberos ticket granting ticket, or KRB TGT account. Now, using that account, attackers can then create a Kerberos ticket granting ticket, or TGT, that provides authorization to any resource and then set the ticket expiration. Now, golden tickets allow attackers to achieve network persistence, remaining open for further requests. This alert is triggered when a Kerberos TGT is used for more than one of the allowed time permitted as specified in the maximum lifetime for that ticket. So let's go ahead and continue researching some of these other alerts. So let's go back a screen, and here I can see in order to fully understand the scope of breach, I'm now going to look at Lidia's account, and Lidia is the honey token account by the SecOps analyst. So over here in the user and group membership reconnaissance alert, we're going to click on Lidia. And this is going to take us to Lidia's account. Now again, Lidia is a domain admin. She's a member of some sensitive groups here. And honey token accounts, if you're not familiar, are really decoys that are deployed by SecOps teams or information sec teams to identify and track malicious activity involving these types of accounts. And so honey token accounts should remain unused. So thus, activity from the honey token account usually indicates malicious behavior because it's not normally used. It's there as a decoy. So let's scroll down here to see the rest of these alerts. And we can see the first alert involving this account is an account enumeration reconnaissance alert. So let's go ahead and click on that. And here we can see that in the account enumeration reconnaissance, an attacker uses a dictionary with thousands of usernames and tools like KRB Guess, attempting to guess usernames in the domain. The attacker makes Kerberos requests using these names to find a valid username in the organization's domain. So in this instance, the attacker managed to successfully guess that username of that decoy account. So let's go back. Let's keep investigating. After discovering that username, the attacker then performed a user and group reconnaissance or SAMR attack. So let's go ahead and click on that alert. Now against that account, finding that the account is a member of the domain admins group, we can see what's happening there. So let's go back. And then we can see the attacker then tried to brute force her account password. And we could see that in this alert, suspected brute force attack, Kerberos NTLM. So let's click on that alert. Now, the attacker failed to compromise Lidia's account, likely prompting the attacker to shift focus to Ron Harper, if you remember him, and that help desk account. So this is an example of an attack campaign that you can find out there in the wild. Now, Azure Advanced Threat Protection identifies, detects, and helps you investigate advanced threats, compromised identities, and malicious insider actions directed within the organization. So Azure ATP enables that analyst or that security professional struggling to detect advanced attacks in those hybrid environments to monitor those users, entity behaviors, activities using machine learning, protect those user identities and credentials stored in Active Directory, identify and investigate suspicious user activities and advanced attacks throughout the attack kill chain, and provide really clear incident information on a simple timeline, as you can see here, to really help me better triage. So typically, these attacks are launched against any accessible entity, such as a low privilege user, and then they quickly move laterally until they gain access to valuable assets such as a sensitive account, like we saw here, a domain administrator, again, our decoy account, and really highly sensitive data. Okay, well, let's go back to our timeline of all alerts and let's scroll down a little bit and let's talk about account enumeration reconnaissance alerts. So we're going to click on that alert. And I can see that this is using the computer RDP server as a springboard. So we're going to click on RDP serve. And this is going to bring up that detail page for that computer. So now I want to switch gears. I want to talk about the computer side of this, the device side of this. So this allows me as the analyst to then review resource-specific events and then pivot into any of those being leveraged by an attacker. So if we have Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection and we have the integration enabled under advanced features with Azure Advanced Threat Protection or Azure ATP, this allows me as the analyst to then drill into the machine timeline and continue my investigation into processes that are being ran on that system. So I'm going to click on where it says 2 WD ATP alerts. Now my demo environment's a little old. This is when we called it Windows Defender ATP. It's now been renamed. Bear with me here. I'm going to click on 2 WD ATP alerts. Now this is going to take me out to Defender ATP and the Defender Security Center. Now, having this level of insight into system running processes allows me to locate event sequences leading to a compromise of the network. So we're going to click on this alert here that says, we detected Mimikatz high severity malware. And here within the Defender Security Center, we can see more information about that. And we can see that's a verified pass the hash attack that really occurred using the Mimikatz tool. So from the actions menu here, we're going to drop that down and we're going to click on View Machine Timeline. And all right, so in the machine view, we're going to scroll down on the timeline here, and we're going to click on the event hack tool where Mimikatz was found. And we can see that the actual tool here was Mimikatz. We can see that it was a credential theft, and it was successfully remediated by the service. So pretty cool stuff, right? Again, this is amazing. This is the integration between Azure Advanced Threat Protection and Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection. Okay, folks, I hope you found value in this video. Again, this was a demonstration of Azure Advanced Threat Protection. If you're not familiar with Azure ATP and you need an overview, check out this video here that will give you an overview of how it works. All right, take care. We'll see you in the next video. And please be sure to subscribe so you can be notified the next time I upload a video.